Peace. This is A&B, African Man Born on the Culture Speaks, a true hip-hop podcast for those who live it. Let's get into it.
I am hip-hop culture, predator the vultures. Rappers getting high, spitting lines, I be sober. Never need an entourage, partner who holds us down when I come around. Massachusetts soul child, say me in your masu. Knowledge will surpass you. Silly rap crews, walking shady as they move. I am the God man, I be living in the proof. I be teaching all the youth on the elements they use. Turn the television off, all the government is plotting on our sons, and we disrespect our daughters as we living in the slums, and we stay.
Peace. This is A&B, African Man Born on the Culture Speaks, a true hip-hop podcast for those who live it.
Make decisions like a grown man and plan my future up for the unity to take it over. Gather everyone. This is who I am as I'm representing hip-hop. I will take a stand while I'm representing hip-hop. Gotta be my best as I'm representing hip-hop. God in the flesh as I'm representing hip-hop. This is who I am as I'm representing hip-hop. I will take a stand while I'm representing hip-hop. Gotta be my best as I'm representing hip-hop. God in the flesh as I'm representing hip-hop.
Peace. Welcome to the Culture Speaks, a true hip hop podcast for those who live it. All right. I want to get into this briefly about hip hop being started by which race, Puerto Ricans or Black Americans or Jamaicans or whatever the case may be in this argument. I'm gonna be very brief with this episode. It's not gonna go on very too long. I'm gonna have probably two segments, and one of them is gonna be this, and the other one's gonna be the receipts, and then I'm gonna leave this shit alone because I think it's dumb. Because one, all right, and I explained this on Random Thoughts briefly, so I could have just left it there, but I don't want to leave it there. Peace. This is Random Thoughts, where I'll give you 5 to 10 minutes of Random Thoughts, so here we go. So I've been watching things online centered around hip-hop, and usually I would do this on the Culture Speaks, but it needs to be addressed more than once, because I find it real funny that nobody wants to acknowledge black involvement of black culture. Hip-hop is black culture. But also, when you say black, of course, it has no standing in origin of what you talk about nationality. Like Puerto Rico is the province, all right? And then you have like an American, or it's really indigenous natives, you know what I'm saying? And when you say like Haitians and Moors and all this other stuff. So when I get into that, the reason why I talk about these things in the way that I talk about them is because it is silly that we're having these arguments and discussions about if Puerto Ricans and blacks who started hip-hop. First of all, hip-hop itself, the culture of hip-hop or hip-hop culture is black. The reason why I don't want to leave it there is because what happens is people keep trolling the issue to create division. Hip-hop was not created on racial division. Hip-hop was not created on who started what. Hip-hop wasn't nearly necessarily being documented from the times that some of these people are talking. There was one guy, he said hip-hop, and he was Puerto Rican. He said that hip-hop was being documented. Hip-hop started in 1971.
In order for us to move forward in life, we need to know the truth. Hip-hop did not start in 1973. Hip-hop started in 1971. The reason they say hip-hop started in 1973 because Kool Herc wrote down on a piece of paper the invitation to his sister's party that they had in the community center. Hip-hop did not start in a building with balconies with nothing across the street. The reason they dubbed it the home of hip-hop, because many don't know that building was due to be demolished. And the only way to save the building was to make it a landmark. Kool Herc told me himself, it's too late. It's already on paper. And it's true, it's too late, it's already on paper. In order for us to keep it real and be the realest ones in the world, we gotta know the truth, bro. Okay, let's stop with the separation shit, bro. Okay?
I argue that that's not the case because nobody looked at it as hip-hop in 71. When we say hip hop, we're talking about when it was called hip hop, when we established it, when it was established as a culture. That was not in 71, that was not in 72, and it was not in 73. When did this happen? According to reference, 74. November 12th, 1974, where the Zulu Nation, formerly known as the Black Spades, had, right, their meeting and established it as hip hop. All right, as a culture, hip hop as a culture by the Zulu Nation. The Zulu Nation established what we was doing as a culture, because all of these things existed through different people. Now, when we're talking about hip hop, we have to understand that Puerto Ricans were involved, Jamaicans, the DJing that you have, the style of DJing, that was Jamaican dub house DJing. That's a style that came from the Caribbean. In Trinities, they used to do that. You know what I'm saying? This is back in the 60s and way before we established something as hip hop. Everything in hip hop, let's understand something. Everything in hip hop started, right, with elements that already existed. Elements that already existed created what we know as hip hop today. So therefore, nobody can claim it as their own. Now, to Crazy Leg's point is, you can't say that Puerto Ricans were not involved in the evolution of hip hop, or just hip hop period, or part of the creation. I can't argue that, because he was there doing breaking probably before we even labeled it as hip hop. You know what I'm saying? But I have videos where he talks about hip hop being black.
Everything, all the breaking and stuff like that was considered underground. And Kulture brought everything out into the open. And that was like, say, 74, 75. All the underground stuff, all the in-house, all the hallway dances, and all the house party dances were brought out to the street. And the more they took it to the street, the more nationalities got involved in it. You know, it was no longer Afro-American. The Hispanic took to the dance. The Hispanic took to the dance. The Hispanic took to the dance. And when they did, it was like, oh shit, check out the Puerto Rican B-boys, you know? A lot of people used to call it like, like the Latinos, Moreno means black, they be like, that's that Moreno style, and that's the original style of B-boy. So black, a lot of people used to call it like, like the Latinos, Moreno means black, they be like, that's that Moreno style, and that's the original style of B-boy. Black kids invented breaking as we know it, as we understand it. It was black kids invented breaking as we know it, as we understand it.
No, because guess what? Puerto Ricans are black. No. So when we're arguing about these things, Lord Jamar's point is that Puerto Ricans weren't as involved in its creation and in its evolution. That's one of the things that he said based on his experience, right? Now you got to look at the experience of these individuals that are saying, well, Puerto Ricans weren't there. Then you have to look at the experience of the Puerto Ricans that say they were there. Then you have to look at the experience of some of the other people that said the Puerto Ricans weren't there to a certain period. You have to understand that New York is a big place. New York City is a big place. The Bronx is a big place. Brooklyn's a big place. Queens is a big place. You know what I'm saying? We found out years later that Queens was doing a lot of the parties in their parks over where they were at around the same time that KRS-One was talking about in the South Bronx. What you got to understand about the South Bronx song was that it was a battle record, because KRS-One and Scott LaRock was trying to be on the Juice Crew, but also they was trying to get noticed on the radio, and they got dissed by Mr. Magic. So he felt like, the people that you're endorsing are garbage in comparison to me, so I'm gonna put out a record and I'm gonna diss where they're from, right? This was the answer record era, where people made records to step on the toes of other artists that were shining so they can move ahead. It kind of still happens today, but it doesn't really affect their money, especially with the money that a lot of these artists are making now and the fame that they have. It doesn't really affect their brand unless it's damaging, right? But let's get back to the point of hip hop being started by some people are saying that hip hop was started by Puerto Ricans, right? Okay, let's say hip hop was started by Puerto Ricans, right? What did I tell you before? Hip hop is black. Period. Puerto Ricans are black. Period. You know what I'm saying? Trinis, black. You know what I'm saying? Jamaicans, black. Afro-Americans, African-Americans, whatever you want to call yourself. Melanated people. There's a melanated history that started all of these different races that you're talking about. Even Caucasians, right? We know that there was a Latin involvement in the Bronx when they had their clubs before they got burned down in the 60s. And then there was a lot of poverty in these same areas where blacks, Puerto Ricans resided. So we're not taking away from the fact that Puerto Ricans were involved. We're not saying that, and that's not even the truth to even say that Puerto Ricans weren't involved in the evolution of hip hop. But just understand something. Hip hop in itself, and not even just hip hop, but music in itself, were black. Not necessarily black American. It could have been Caribbean, but understand, even black Americans have an origin of place of where their family came from. Like me, my mother came from Panama. You know what I'm saying? So therefore, that makes me Afro-Latino. You see what I'm saying? According to labels. But I'm a melanated man at the end of the day. And I don't really care about race in the sense of racial separation and division based on things. It started with black culture. You can look at the 4 elements and you see the 5 elements of existing on earth. You know what you got? Earth, water, wind, fire, right? And then the 5th element is pretty much our black women. Wisdom, love, unity, whatever sits in that place is humane. 5th element deals with humanity, which knowledge comes with that, wisdom comes with that, love comes with that, gender comes with that. All of these things fit into that 5 element section. That 5th element section. If you look at the movie 5th Element, you will see that with Bruce Willis, and I forgot the girl's name that was in it, right? The reason why I'm saying this is because I was going to go deep into the freaking subject. I seen all the videos. It's just a bunch of back and forth, to be honest. It's a bunch of back and forth foolishness. Now that Bambaataa is not in the picture, now that the Zulu Nation is not in the picture, now everybody wants to fight on who started what. We all know that hip hop was started by black people, whether they were Puerto Rican, whether they were Jamaican, whether they were Trini, whether they were African American. That's who started hip hop. But at the same time, hip hop was put together and established. Hip hop was not necessarily created, it was used. There was elements that were used to create this culture. So everything, all the elements that were there, all the elements that are in hip hop were already existing. This is why Grandmaster Caz said hip hop created nothing. It recreated everything, which means that MCing, people rhymed way before we called it hip hop. DJing, people did that way before we called it hip hop. Graffiti, people were writing on the walls of graffiti way before. And you could trace that shit back all the way to ancient Kemet, Egypt, Tamaray, Hamat. You could trace that way back. That is a form of what we call graffiti or mural art. You know what I'm saying? What we have now, when we say graffiti, we're talking about the gang tags and all that, but that's all forms of graffiti. You know what I mean? Now, whatever you live in a state or the United States or Europe, wherever, they might say it's illegal. It's called, they call it vandalism, right? But graffiti always existed. We was writing on the walls way before. We didn't even call it graffiti. We call it hieroglyphs. You know what I'm saying? Cuneiform, all of these different things we were writing on the walls. You even can see Egyptian, what we know as Egyptian hieroglyphs on the Grand Canyon. So therefore, hieroglyphs, glyph writing, mural drawing, portraits on walls always existed. All right? And then you say breaking. Who was dancing first? Let's just understand who was dancing first, who was doing those moves first, who was kicking and doing all the coolest moves. We were. Now, when you say Latinos were doing cool moves to salsa, merengue, bachata. But guess what? All of those sounds have African influence. The congas, The djembe's in there sometimes. You hear, you know what I mean? Salsa, African love dance, before it became Latino. Because the word Latino, when you look at the word Latino, right? Saying that you're Latin. We don't speak Latin. You know what I mean? We speak dialects of Latin. Spanish is a dialect of Latin. Portuguese is a dialect of Latin. English is the last form of language, and it's a dialect of Latin because it uses all different forms of language to create its language. That's why you can look at a thesaurus and you can see where the origin from. You can look in a dictionary and see that it has a thesaurus side, and it will tell you where it originated from, because therefore English is not really a language. It is a dead, broken down dialect, right? So what do we do in hip hop with English? We translated words in rhyme form when we was MCing. We translated messages through DJing. We translated messages and energies through dancing. We translated messages and energies on the walls to tell you the story. So understand that hip hop, in its raw essence, hip hop, and then the knowledge to know how to do these things, whether it was MCing, DJing, graffiti, all of these things, or if you know how to do all of them or just one of them, you are the fifth element. Lord Jamar says, where did the five elements come from? Well, you know it came from the Zulu Nation. And you know that the Zulu Nation pulled that from African culture and history. Being a 5%er, he should know that. And he does. No disrespect to Lord Jamar. He's a legend in himself. You know what I'm saying? A lot of people hate him. I don't. But he's you know, he has his way of thinking, and I respect it. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to sit there and go back and forth with him because he's been in this shit longer than I have. But understand that when you talk about five elements, you know where the fifth element of hip hop came from. You know that it's knowledge. Karis One calls it street knowledge. Some of us just say knowledge. You know what I'm saying? And this pulls from the five elements of the universe, like I've been said. Earth, wind, water, fire. Earth, wind, water, fire. Or knowledge, or humanity. Whatever you want to call it. Knowledge deals with the humane psyche, brain, thinking. You know what I mean? So, understand this. When it comes to hip hop was not started by one racial group.
They tell you, listen, they tell you Latinos created hip hop. That's not true.
No, absolutely right.
Were we there to help develop it in the evolution? Yeah. Absolutely. Nobody can take that away from us.
Right.
And understand that Puerto Rico is not a racial group. Puerto Rico is an origin of place where a group of people came from. And it was taken over by United States, which is why it's not a country, it is a province. Now, this is no disrespect to all of my Puerto Rican brothers and sisters. All right? But Puerto Rico, Puerto Ricans, right? You are a part of hip hop as Nubian culture. You are of Nubian culture. The way you act, the way you talk, even when you speak Spanish, you speak it as if you were not any other race but Nubian. Some black folks relate to more Puerto Ricans than they do their own people in their own neighborhood that are black. Because you're the same fucking people. You speak Spanish, I speak broken English, we're the same fucking people. And I've heard both in my house growing up. My mother's from Panama. There's mostly black people that live in Panama, for those who don't know. All right? There's an African ancestry in Puerto Rico, if you don't know. Like I said, man, Latinos were part of the development of hip-hop, just like Jamaicans, who are black, are a part of the development of hip-hop, just like Trinis, the development, they developed a part, and definitely Afro-Americans probably gave the most influence to the culture, and I can say this, right? Because African Americans are a mix of all of those different types of people that you just saw, that I just said. I bet you if you look up most of the people that were to the culture at that time as it was being developed, most of them have probably an African background of the continent background, a Puerto Rican background, a Dominican background, a Haitian background, a friggin', you know, what's the other ones? From Nicaragua, Panama, you know what I'm saying? Anyone. they had a background that existed outside of this, what we call the United States of America. So when you're sitting here arguing and fighting, understand that you are falling into the same hands of those that want to separate you. Hip hop is about peace, love, unity, and having fun. Before I go to break, what did I say in the first verse of the purpose of hip hop? The purpose of this culture is bringing people together. It started way back in the 70s era. After Kool Herc put it in work, he had emerged from the Latin Revolution leaking through the music. The 60s in the Bronx, all the parties were large. There was a unification through the sound of the drum. Afro-Latin, freestyle, playing it in action. The interaction was spiritual, was sort of like magic. The passion was immaculate. The government attacked it, yeah. They burned the buildings. People had no access, fam. Poverty grew with separated factions and gang violence swamping through the atmosphere. Broken homes, kids alone, seeing rats advance. Cops beating on the kids on the concrete lands. No money, no hope, and they have no chance until that party started. Everything you hear, my man. I want you to think about that before we go to the next segment, all right? On the Culture Speaks. I'll see you on the next segment. Peace.